How's everybody feeling? Not that this morning was super structured, but this afternoon is going to be even less structured. I want to open up to like more conversation. Something that, in our last meeting, I don't know if all of you guys are aware of this, but there were a lot of people who knew they weren't going to be able to make it, and then there were like 5 or 6 people who had like last minute things come up, and then there were like another 5 or 6 people who had like in the morning like things that came up that made it impossible to come. And so we had 4 of us there last time that we met. And the lovely part about it was that we really got to open into conversation more. And I think that that's something, if I have to be like really honest, that I'm feeling like I'm missing a little bit, is just to like hear your voices and your input, because I learned so much when people share. And I think that's partially why we sit in circle too. Clearly, like I have some things that I want to share and an outline for the day, but I do want to, I want to start by opening up this afternoon just by kind of asking you. Well, actually, I'll ask you all a different question first. Is anyone unfamiliar with chakras? A little bit? Yeah. Okay, so I'll give them like...
I'm listening to you, so now I'm following.
What's that?
Yeah.
So like the very like brief outline of it would be this. So if in Chinese medicine, they were able to say like, oh, okay, here are like the 12 main meridians in which energy runs. Going back more towards like Hindu traditions and yogic studies, they would say we have 72,000 nadis, that we have these, I'm calling them plexes, that we have these areas that certain emotions tend to be in. And that when they tuned into them, they'd be like, oh, okay, I'm seeing the color red, or I'm sensing the color red or yellow or green. So we have our first chakra, which is our energy center, which we've talked about being like familial and tribal and belonging, which is a big one. Toko Pa Turner's book, Belonging, is worth reading for everybody. And second chakra being like when we did pelvic floor, that energy of like sensuality and creativity and expression and the balance of like the yin and the yang and the element water. So there are these centers, and kind of interestingly, those centers of energy line up pretty well with different nerve plexes. So it's kind of like, oh, isn't that interesting that this is where there's going to be like more blood flow, more feedback, more sensations. And I think as we begin to study more emotional anatomy, it'll be like, and yeah, that when there's injury here or when something's happening, isn't that interesting? These emotions that they were saying 5,000 years ago might have to do with, there's just a lot of correspondence between what we're finding today and what people discovered thousands of years ago just through listening to their body. So every chakra affects every other one. I was talking to Laura, or we were kind of discussing that as she sang, and when she went into that like deep guttural place that also then went high, that it wasn't a new thought for me necessarily, but like a new way of feeling that, wow, the third chakra strength that it takes for us to speak our truth, to make the sounds that we need to say, like to make in order to express ourselves, whether it's through like grieving or really really laughing or saying the hardest thing that we need to say to somebody that we can't, that we're so afraid to say because maybe they won't like us anymore, or maybe whatever it is, like that's third chakra and fifth chakra, which is communication together, so that they're always interacting with one another, and sometimes a block somewhere will affect something above it. So it's just kind of looking at these emotional centers. And for me, it's, as Carrie and I were talking the other night, it's never being like 1,000%, this is 100%, like this is 1,000%, 100% true. This is definitely true. It's really just, isn't this interesting? Like it's an exploration of, there are a whole bunch of people that believe this, there are books written about it, and what am I finding in my body, and does it seem to correlate, and is there truth for me? And it more leaves it open as that, like it opens doors for interest and curiosity. So what we did earlier today was third chakra, an energy center, and now we're moving up to the fourth chakra. And I wanted to ask you guys, so the fourth chakra is the heart center. So if I were to just tell you like heart center, I'm curious if anyone would be willing, and I guess we could journal first, but we're not going to. We will journal. If anyone would be willing to share with me, like what feelings do you associate with the heart?
Love, healing, grace.
Love, healing, and grace. Compassion, grief, sadness, longing. There's a whole chapter in belonging on longing.
What was his name again?
Her name is Toko Pa, and I believe is it
Turner.
Turner? Yeah, but it's
Oh, that's a book?
yeah. No, that's the author, and it's Toko / Pa, P-A, and then Turner. So we have compassion, grace. Was one that was not passing by my mind, so thank you. Grace, grief, sadness. I've heard that lungs hold sadness.
Yeah, I never think of the heart as sadness and what was the other one?
But that the heart and the lungs, this is just what my acupuncturists were telling me, are like so connected, so that the grief that you're feeling in your heart shows up as sadness in your lungs.
Something I wouldn't have thought of
Oh.
as grief or something. I don't know where I would have thought of. That's interesting to me. That's probably right.
Anybody else? I've been trying to find my page so that maybe I'll just speak it as I've been thinking it. I've been thinking a lot about, last time we did an experience of like, what are the emotions of kind of what we see on the front side of the chakras versus or even of our body, than the back side of our body. And when I came to the heart, and I know I've probably expressed this before, that when I start to pay attention to the back side of my body, I start to become more aware of, I don't know if this is a right term to say a priori, but this is like this pre-existing gratitude of like when I really kind of sink into paying attention. So if you all were to sit there, and we'll do it again, I know we've done it 100 times, like to rub the back of your hands, and the back of your arms, and the back of your shoulders, and the back of your head. Just taking your hands and rubbing the back of your hands along the back of your back. And then how Janelle had us like hug ourselves before and feel the breath into our sides. If you can keep your hands on your back, and whether it's like from hugging or just back of the hands on the back, and kind of begin to feel the breath more into the back side of your body. And then lower your hands down, but still bringing the attention to the back side of your heart. The back side of your head. And noticing any emotions, named or unnamed. When you honor the part of you that you can't see. And when you honor that part, what new things become visible? If you'd like to, you can open your eyes. I love staying in that place back there. So for me, I noticed that like when the more present I am, the easier it is to feel this like full body presence and gratitude without having to say like, I'm thankful for this bowl and the thing that gongs it. I'm thankful for, like I don't necessarily have to list what's in front of me and all the things. It is like a state of gratitude that exists within me just for the gift of being alive. Like just for the gift of being in my body without having to even name those things, right? It's like it's pre-existing. And so when I was playing with this idea of like the light and shadow of the back side of my heart and the front side of my heart, the shadow of the backside, I think, and I'm just exploring this, but I think it's resentment. And a chiropractor I used to work with in New York who did like tapping and muscle testing told me that once when I had this like pinpoint right between like my shoulder blade and my spine. And he was like, oh, that's resentment. And he like muscle tested it and all that. And I was like, I don't resent anybody. And he, was able to go through the ages and pulled up the people. I was like, no, I don't resent them. And he was like, well, resentment just means you went along with something when you didn't want to. And I was like, oh, whew, okay, yeah, I do that, right? Like I do that. And all the ways that our body must hold on to that, of all the times that we didn't honor ourselves, and we just say yes to like keep things easy, to keep things peaceful, and we kind of like at the expense of ourselves, which in the end I think is at the expense of the people around us too. It's not really necessarily a gift to somebody else. And when I think of the front of the heart, when I think of the front of the heart, like this is where like you can see if somebody is like, if their light is turned on, right? And you can see like the love, and you can see like, this is like, oh my God, I love you, come here, give me a hug, right? This is like where love is apparent. It's like on the front side of us. Gratitude, totally present, and like, this is like, I'm feeling so excited about life. Like there's a little bit more of like an upliftment of the front of the body. And then grief is not hiding in the back. Grief is right in the front. That's the shadow side. And it's so important too. I think I've grieved before in my life. I know I have. And I know I've made mention of this before, but last year, and maybe like going into the year before that, was like my first time of just where I would say like, I don't want to say it wouldn't leave me alone, but it would just keep showing up. Like one of my friends said, it'll be like a bomb. It'll go off when you least expect it, and you'll never know, and you'll think that you're cool, and you think you got it together, and you think you've processed it, and it'll go off again. And this confusion for me, I'll just share this with you, this confusion for me of wanting to be able to like shift my state, use my breath, use my posture, and like, how do I balance my ability to have like agency over my feelings versus like honoring the feelings that are coming through. So in this session with, his name is Tom, anyone else can help me with this? Kubasik. He said to me, I said, I'm really good. I've been good since I was a small girl at being able to like, if someone yells at me or got mad at me, I could be like, oh, they've had a really hard time at work recently. They're super tired. These other 5 things are going on. So although that thing I did really did upset that person, it's not all about, like I could say like, it's not personal. And I could look from someone else's perspective, but my emotions were still hurt. And I'd get mad at my emotions, like, why can't you get on board? My mind has figured it out. It's not personal. And I've done that the rest of my life and always been very confused between like feeling my feelings and the fact that my rational brain can figure out like how I'm wrong, which makes it okay, and how I can understand somebody else's perspective and have empathy and like, And this was the most powerful thing that he said to me. He said, your emotions are intelligent. And every time you rationalize them, I'm going to now paraphrase into my wording, you become disembodied. And every time that you listen to them, then you're listening to a signaling system that's telling you something that you need, right? So that if anger is a secondary emotion, what is it a secondary emotion of? What are you afraid of? What are you feeling vulnerable about? What are you feeling sad about? And if you can like go into, if I could go into my body instead of saying like, figuring out my story, figuring out the other person's story, then getting like upset that my emotions won't get on board with my rational mind. If I could instead go in and say, oh, body, what are you telling me? What is it that I need? What is my level of worth that I'm not listening to? And then being able to ask that of myself or to somebody else. And for me, it was this very potent thing of honoring my body and my emotions. So that even brings me back to like grieving, of just like, and I want to read a few things. I'll come back to this, but shame is the feeling of the third chakra. Grief is the feeling of the front of the fourth chakra, I think. So Tokapa Turner says, grief is a reaction to being torn from what you love. The word grief and praise are the same in the, I'm going to butcher this, I'm not even going to say it, the something language. You can look it up. It's on page 121. Because you only grieve what you dearly love. Grief is the soul's acknowledgement of what we value. Grief is the honor we pay to that which is dear to us. And then this was one of my favorite, which is grief is healing in motion. Whew. Grief is healing in motion. There is an unspoken shame associated with grief. Hidden for too long, it can calcify in place, often sealed by shame. Third and fourth chakra together. And she goes on to say we are a product of several generations of ungrieved wounds. And I think that was also, I keep going back to the sound. Part of the sound that you shared with us was like, that's what it felt like. You know, like to me, it felt like these sounds that we don't let ourselves make because we're trying to hold it all together. That third chakra of like, I will hold it together. I don't want to seem like a mess. But what if we allowed that, or even had spaces for that? So Katie runs Tuesday night grief circles to create space for that. And I've thought about like running, I don't know if it would be called a webinar, is that right? Whereas like, I just feel like we don't have enough training or enough awareness of it at least in our society, in our culture, like what do you do with these big feelings? And I've been fortunate enough to be able to go to some places with some of my girlfriends where it helped me to see like we all, like every person, there's a good chance that every person in this room has immense pain that like we all like need space and time to work through. So finding those times and those places. And I think in the middle of the heart, if I were to work to like the central sensation of the middle of the heart, there is a wisdom. There's also like, to me, this is kind of like where the community aspect lies. Do you guys feel that at all? I'm totally open to like what your senses are of it, but to me, that's kind of like where the we lies. And like connection to community, so that even like I think grieving is somewhat of a solo journey. However, having those circles that we can go into and having those people who drop off flowers or just send a heart text or whatever it is that just like lets you know like you're not alone. Like that's the center.
I guess I would just quickly say like grief is oftentimes a solo journey, but part of saying about not sort of giving space to those big feelings is that we don't engage community in grief.
Yeah.
And it's a real loss in that, in our society and as people, that we don't get the chance to really take it on.
Yeah.
And when you talk about, us each having the wounds of our ancestors, unhealed grief, we just continue to perpetuate that unless we are sort of able to find a way to embrace it in community. I don't know exactly what that looks like. Maybe it looks like a little bit of what you were referencing, spending time together in a circle. I don't know. But it does seem like there needs to be a big community aspect for us to really sort of heal that as a society and group of people.
Yeah. I think just like shame, as soon as you shine a light on it, you create a space for it, it's no longer shameful and it's no longer isolating.
Grief is good.
It's healing in motion.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I never put it in those words, but that's exactly what, because that is what it feels like. It feels like if you're grieving, then it's there. You're feeling it, right? So, versus suppressing it, you're feeling the grief. And then how you verbalize that or get support from others is kind of up to you because you have to show your grief or maybe, unfortunately you have to talk about it or something. But until it was put into words, I was like, yeah, that is what it feels like. And the more, and when you grieve, then you feel like you're healing. The more it goes on.
Yeah.
When you were asking about the backside, what came up for me was isolation, and so it's really neat to think about community and connection being this kind of that center point, and grief and love being just the same thing in their full expression without being stuck in isolation or not allowed to move, and that. When I think of what feels toxic or unhealthy, it's certain patterns that we may find ourselves in. Some of them, even as you said, being from the patterns where our ancestors, we can even just look at our own parents or our grandparents where that has been stuck and isolated. And I would definitely bring third chakra in and been in a place of shame, shame and isolation together. And that it is when we actually are able to be open-hearted in our joy and in our grief that, I can think of some of my own experiences of grief. Literal days where I've been in utter grief and have also been able to experience total joy.
Yeah.
And it doesn't feel toxic. It feels powerful and beautiful and scary and vulnerable and right. And it's that shame and isolation where we get into that rigidity and that toxic space. Yeah.
Thank you. That reminded me of a day when I kind of collapsed on my kitchen floor and I was in tears, but I was kind of afraid to be in that space in front of Sophia. And she came up to me and she's like, "Mama, are you sad?" And here I have this gorgeous little girl in front of me. And it with 100% honesty, I said, "I'm sad and I'm happy." And and it was 100% true. And you're right, to be able to feel both at the same time and just yeah, they can both be true. And I think the confusing thing for me sometimes is this movement to always put ourselves in a happy state. Which is why I love twisting, by the way. Because I can honor both. Yeah.
For me, the back body stuff feels more like trust and that believing. And through meditation last year and Laura's work, the whole back body was very much part of it. And then when we were doing the
Monisha thing, and I saw you standing there like, oh, this is how that back body is going to. And now I'm reading Kate's book, and there's all like coming together in this as I'm down taking care of my niece and nephew, and that dropping the rope and staying in my back body, and I can feel myself in that forward versus backwards and that push, pull, and all the doing less but needing to be all. And so the more that I drop the rope and stay in my back body, the more other things can happen. There's that allow in that space, and they will do their thing, and I'm not. Is your homework done? Is your homework done? Have you done your homework? Have you done your homework? And I kind of can like overcorrect and go way back and hands back, but then there's like a sweet spot in the middle where like I can feel that I'm not, and I'm doing less, but I'm not shut off to it. So there's like this, almost when I sit here, it's like one of those, they're called a pendulum, but
Seesaw?
no, it's like where you can sit it back and it balances like a pendulum kind of, I guess, just in that perfect resting place of like finding that place of where are you in space and time, and not being so forward or back, but just kind of held there. And it's really cool, and I can see it having direct impact on how I am in the world and how it responds to other people, because like as there's no separation, as you pull back, then you pull them with you or towards the homework, which
Back to the homework.
and I pulled back and suddenly I'm watching and I'm pretending like I'm not paying attention, and he's finding his way because I need space for the allow. And he comes in and gets his homework done, brings it out. So I was thinking about this all last week in terms of back body. Trust.
Making space for the allow. I like that too. Making space for the allow. I've become very passionate in the last year and a half, just about, maybe longer. There's been just something that comes up on my phone a couple times a day that says back body breathe, just to remind me to like come back.
It's easy to come and to be in this place all the time, and then to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing less.
When I'm reading into the emotions of the back of the body, so many people will say like, yo, you throw all your shit in the back. And however, like, I don't think it has to be like that. Like, there's this part of me that's like, the reason why I want to talk about light and shadow of the front of the heart and light and shadow of the back of the heart and the center of the heart is just to say like light and shadow exists everywhere, but to also honor the light side of our back. Because again, especially probably when Anusara was like a really, really big deal, it was all about shining your light forward through the heart. And it was all like hollow back. And this, for me, has been so powerful of like bringing ribs in and expanding the backside of my body. Not to say like never this, right? But just like, oh, that there's like so much beauty back here that even though I can't see it, and that there is this trusting and this leaning into and this. So for me, I would say like this is the place of connecting out with people. This is the place with connecting into universal support and faith and the unseen forces. And this is why it's so powerful. Now I feel like when every time I meditate, and in this position, especially up on a block, it's very easy to actually kind of like shorten in the hip flexors and end up here. And so it's like a constant awareness for me now of like coming more back, because I want to feel like I'm not doing this all on my own. There are unseen forces that I can connect into by being in the back of my body.
The word that came up for me when you just told us to sit and sort of think about the back of our heart was truth. And I don't know, that's really what settled down for me, which is truth. And when I was earlier trying to think of the words that describe the emotions of your heart, I couldn't quite come up with what I wanted to say. It was like steadfastness or certainty or something sort of along those lines. But then as soon as I sat with it, which is true.
Love that. Thank you. I'm taking a big inhale, so I think truth is the truth for me. Like, My body's like, yes. And the word, I just want to, because we didn't say this in third chakra, but the word that came up for me as I was journaling after the movement and the sound bowls was worth. I was thinking more than it being like the center of power is like the center of self-worth. Because from self-worth, then you make those choices. And when you have self-worth lined up with truth, that's pretty potent. That's really potent.